Orpheus serves as a mythic condensation of human threshold limits, a map of the interior territory that ordinary consciousness cannot navigate. While the story is often remembered as a moral fable of doubt, the ancient sources describe a physiological breaking point. Within this tradition, music functions as an ontological technology. The lyre is a tool capable of forcing separate domains of existence, the living and the dead, into a temporary, resonant communication. This wasn't merely a poetic concept to the ancient Greeks. Initiates buried these crinkled gold tablets with the dead, providing instructions for the moment they stepped across the border of the underworld. The instructions etched here are specific. The initiate must refuse to drink from the waters of Lethe, which bring forgetfulness. Instead, they are told to seek the lake of memory, mnemosyne. This suggests an ancient understanding of trauma that still holds today. Forgetting provides no resolution. Because the lost do not reduce to zero, survival requires the ritualized preservation of memory across the threshold. Orpheus descends into Hades without a sword. He enters the underworld with vulnerability and a song designed to resonate with the environment rather than conquer it by force. The music alters the affective field of the underworld itself. It doesn't just charm the inhabitants, it temporarily changes the very rules of the domain. Under the influence of that song, the standard punishments of death are temporarily paused. Tantalus forgets his thirst, and the Furies begin to weep, finding a resonance that death usually excludes. Hades is moved by the performance, yet the threshold of death remains. Orpheus achieves a suspension of the laws, but he does not erase the boundary between the two worlds. Relational resonance grants us fleeting access to what we have lost, but it cannot rewrite the underlying reality of absence. It opens a window that must eventually close. To return to life, Orpheus must walk forward while holding the unverified weight of his loss behind him. He has to trust an invisible presence across the length of the return journey. Eurydice is now in a state of liminal presence. She is neither dead nor returned, existing only in the fragile space created by the bond between them. As they approach the surface, the pressure on Orpheus's nervous system becomes unbearable. The attachment system demands physical confirmation of proximity. The senses struggle to hold on to what they cannot see. At the exit of the cavern, the capacity to sustain liminal presence collapses. The backward glance marks the point where the body checks before thought arrives, a physiological failure at the farthest edge of human tolerance. The threshold slams shut because the organism reached its limit. Orpheus is not guilty of a choice. He is human at the boundary of what can be sustained. We rarely ask what it was like for Eurydice when that door closed. She was not passive cargo being hauled back into the light. The underworld had already changed her sign. She had crossed into a new register of existence, and the entity walking behind Orpheus was no longer the same person who had died. In recovery and therapeutic models, we often treat bringing someone back as a return to a prior baseline, to the person they were before the trauma. But the one being brought back often cannot survive the gaze of a premature expectation that they remain unchanged. Pure retrieval alone is a flawed premise. The true ethical task is accompanying someone through a change of medium, helping them integrate what they became in the underworld into a new form of life. This infographic details the Orphic gradient, a model of relational presence that accounts for what remains after a loss. It demonstrates that the missing do not actually vanish from the field. We assume grief moves a person from an embodied presence, a +1, into a neutral absence, 0. But 0 is a false premise. Trauma shifts the sign into inverse presence. Absent physically, the beloved remains as a negative force, actively structuring the survivor's life. Following his failure at the threshold, Orpheus isolates himself in nature. He retreats from human company, to sing only to rocks and trees, fully consumed by the inverse presence of Eurydice. Descent is unmoored without the banks of a living community. Without human ground, the grief becomes a permanent liminality that can no longer nourish life. The myth concludes with the Maenads tearing Orpheus apart. They represent the return of everything he tried to exclude: the body, the ordinary, and the undeniable momentum of mortal life. A song or a grief that refuses to return to the world of the living ultimately provokes its own destruction. proving that love can reach the underworld is only the beginning. It is the easier part of the journey. The harder task is the quiet one, walking home alone and carrying the resonance of the song back into the daylight. We cannot restore what was before, but we can walk home, allowing what has changed sign to become a livable form of what we lost.